Warning, this video is not for beginners. Welcome to this classic tutorial of how you paint a classic 90s orc. For this tutorial I will be using the classic heavy metal guide Warhammer 40k of how you paint this old plastic orc, which you used to be able to get in the old 2nd edition box set. This was the first box set that got me into the game, and I've always coveted these miniatures and how to recreate them and paint them in the old classic style. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the previous paints, so I thought I'd throw up this tutorial on how I went about recreating this classic scheme and the kind of modern paints that we have available to us. So, first step, undercoat the entire thing in white, and then we give a base coat colour, a simple base coat to all the pieces using silver from Vallejo on the silver portions, blood red on the red portions, a mixture of boreal tree green and olive green for the skin. I've thrown a bit of sol yellow in there as well to recreate the classic goblin green, and then Thamar black by Formula P3 for the black portions. Dela Rowney crimson ink is used to darken the surfaces. Inks were used back in the day to create artificial shadows, and they evolved into the wash system used by Games Workshop today. But back in the day, when these techniques were first being explored, first developed, artists used to use drawing inks by Winsor Newton or Rayla Downey. Next up, I'm using Scale 75's green ink all over the skin. I'm concentrating my brush strokes on the shadows ever so slightly, so I'm moving the brush stroke into the shadows. The axe blade is washed with a mixture of blue ink by Scale 75 and black ink by Scale 75. Now the silver, it doesn't cover quite as well, and you can see the ink sitting on the top of the blade, so I'm using the brush to push the paint where I want it to sit, to push it into those shadows. Notice the movement of the brush, always pushing it into those shadows. Games Workshop washes today I think will be a lot better on this kind of surface because it binds on a lot clearer. When it comes to artificial shadows, especially on the blade edge, I've pushed it towards where I think the shadows would naturally sit. Blood red and sol yellow are used in conjunction, so by 50-50 mix, and used to highlight all the red portions. When we add a wash to a miniature, it darkens everything down, it decreases the value. So in order to get to that original point, to our base mixture, we need to add a slightly lighter colour on top. It's the same principle if you think of undercoating a miniature in black and white, and you apply a red glaze over both, a red paint over both. The red will appear darker on the black background, and the one on top of the white will appear brighter. This is essentially what we are doing here. The red wash has darkened everything down, so we need a slightly lighter colour to make it, to build it back up again. I've increased the amount of sol yellow in the mixture and continued on the highlighting stages with the tip of the brush. I really wish I could have found the original red Games Workshop brushes for this tutorial. If you know any in existence, if you know any I could buy, please get in touch, purely for a nostalgia trip on my part. The reason why this came about, I was painting a Blood Angel chaplain that I've videoed, I've recorded, hasn't been released, haven't previewed it anywhere yet, but I was trying to think what to paint for his cloak, and I felt like I had a mental breakdown trying to reference colour theory, what went well, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't. I just wanted to return to something simpler, to follow a guide step by step where I could kind of turn my brain off and just paint alongside Mike Mc Vey. Now this was the edition I first got started in the hobby, so there's a lot of nostalgia, there's a lot of memories built up when flicking through these older books and trying to recreate these classic colour schemes, and by God, they are so big, they are so bombastic. The colour palette I use today is a lot more duller It's a lot grayer, it's a lot more nuanced in nature. I think the technology involved of snapping photographs on your phone, we're able to see more of the objects now. We don't have to rely so much on catching the eye from a distance. Back then, big, bold, strong transitions is what was needed to really capture your eye, and it was really nice to try out these old techniques. It felt like new techniques returning to them. But it was really nice just trying out this big, bombastic, heavy highlighting and shading without much in the way of blending in between. For any of you out there who have just completed a big project, I'm recording this after the Sanguinius series, which is a big, heavy topic with each portion very specific. It's a test of will to try and get those videos out, and to paint that kind of miniature, you do grapple with it. It would be worth just a refresh in the palette to go back to something like this and thrash it out in under 40 minutes. It's a really refreshing way to paint a miniature where you don't have to necessarily worry about the end result, because you know the simplistic techniques, the simplistic brush strokes you're applying. Well, it's just a nice, enjoyable experience, and you don't have to worry constantly about color theory or finished result. Oh, right here. Okay, perfect. That's how the guide recommends you do checkered stripes. Even though this is a very simple to paint miniature, you can still embellish it with a few details, so when you look at it, it looks far more advanced than it actually is. I finish off the horns with a touch of marrow white mixed in with sol yellow and hot orange. And you can see I'm dragging the brush down to fade out, to feather the white. And then I've applied a very, very thin coat of hot orange to glaze over the top to unite everything together. But nothing more than that. Nothing more than maybe 2-3 strokes of the brush to really solidify the paint job. The eyes are painted in black first, and then white, and then hot orange is applied as a glaze over the top. All of the bone areas, I cheated a little bit here. I did rely a bit on colour theory. I took my yellow and I mixed black into it to create a bone colour, and I've added white to desaturate it. You can by all means use your bleach bone equivalent, birch from scale 75 for example, whatever colour that you instantly go, Ushabti bone, whatever is your go-to bone colour, apply a layer of that, use a brown ink on top, in this case chestnut brown, and then reapply your bone colour plus add a touch of white for the highlight. Okay, next up we are refining some of the details on the shoulder plate. It's done at this point. I'm just faffing around with things, adding a few details here and there, and especially the back image, which is broken down in the Heavier Metal guide. It's as simple as drawing a couple of semicircles and adding a layer in between. I use black to solidify the image, just using the very tip of my brush. Black ink is a really nice idea to use here, so it slips off the brush easier. Oh, I just dropped the miniature there. Fantastic, but it's plastic, you know, it will be fine. And of course, to finish it off, classic Goblin Green, or my closest approximation of it. I hope this is one of the nicer pranks played on you today. Happy April Fool's Day, everybody! If you aren't a patron and you're considering upping your own paint game, why not join on? You can join for as little as $7 to gain access to 21 PDF tutorials to date. If you wanted to pledge for the $15, you get over 112 videos and counting, as well as all previous seminars, PDF tutorials, the lot. Thank you so much, guys. I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.